Okay, this is a review of the lesson that we've been working on about the themes of social studies. So these are the main things that we'll be looking at as we study our course this year. Get rid of that. Okay. So the first theme or main topic for social studies is the idea of geography. And geography has to do with the land and water around us and how we interact with that land and water. So the buzzwords for this topic, there are quite a few. Maps, globe. There are 7 continents. Continents are the big, large pieces of land. This is a continent. This is the one we live in. This is North America. There are 7 continents. There's North America, South America, Africa, Europe, Asia, Australia, and Antarctica. But we live in North America, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 continents. We also have oceans that surround us. You guys know the oceans are the water that's on the earth. And on our maps, we have some invisible lines. So if we go to these places in person, we would not see these lines. But for the purposes of map making, they created some lines called longitude and latitude lines. And the 2 lines that start off those longitude and latitude lines are called the equator and the prime meridian. The equator divides the Earth in half from top to bottom. And these sections of the Earth are called hemispheres. They're called hemispheres. So this up above here is the northern hemisphere. North America is in the northern hemisphere. It is above the equator. I have another thought. The prime meridian line goes up and down through the globe, and it divides the world from west to east or east to west. We are in the northwestern hemispheres, okay? For the purpose of our quiz, you'll need to know we are in the northern hemisphere. So the other topic that we talk about a lot in history or with social studies is the idea of time, when things happen or happened, okay? So we use a calendar in order to determine when things happen. And the type of history we're going to learn this year actually takes place before our calendar starts. And our calendar is considered a Western calendar, and that means that this type of calendar began when year 1 started when Jesus Christ was thought to be born. That's when they started our calendar. And before that, there's the time before, the prehistory, which is called BCE. Those years are they have the initials BCE, and it's before our calendar begins. So our year 1 starts when Jesus Christ was thought to be born. The next topic that we talk about with social studies is the idea of economics. So the word I want you to think of when you think of economics is money. You guys know what money is. You know how you have to make money. You make money by getting a job. Another fancy word for job is occupation. We also use the word employment and unemployment when we talk about economics. So you'll hear in the news lately that our economy is suffering because of the pandemic. That means the amount of money that's moving around in our country has declined. There's less money in our economy because less people are working, and we have higher unemployment, meaning there's a lot of people that have lost their jobs. And then another word that goes along with economics is the idea of trade. Now, back in the day, they used to trade items for items. So gold for rice, or rice for spices, or things like that. We don't use trade in that sense anymore. We trade dollars for items instead, but we still use the word trade. Okay, so all those words have to do with economics or economy. The next term that you need to know is the word artifact. Artifact comes from the study of archaeology, and archaeology is studied by people who dig in the ground and have found some items left behind by humans. And those items are referred to as artifacts. They are objects that are created by humans. And so when we look at the past, we have mummies, there are potteries, and then tools like these, early tools that were sharpened by humans. And we talked about how if our mountain here collapsed on us and 300 years from now, people were digging in the earth to find things, maybe human remains or different items, some of the items they would find that are unique to our era are our cell phones, our Chromebooks, our computer technology, telephones. Those kind of things are artifacts. So even though we usually refer to artifacts as things that are left behind, that are from the past, they are also things that we are creating now because they are still being created by humans. So those are artifacts. And then we get into how we look at history. So when we talk about history, we talk about different types of sources. Sources are things that you go to look up information. And there are things called primary sources. Primary means first. So primary sources are first-hand accounts of an event. And we talked today about how I was living during 9/11, and if I had written something down at that time, maybe a blog post or a journal entry, something like that, that could be used as a primary source. I could talk about where I was when it happened. I can talk about how I felt when I saw the towers collapse. That would be a primary source. And they're found in letters, so letters from person to person, diaries, journals, newspapers, court records, and art. So even art, paintings, and things like that, they can be used as primary sources that tell us what happened in an event. And then the next one is secondary sources. So second means two. So the second sources are sources that talk about other people's experiences. And we talked about how if someone took Miss Claypool's journal entry about 9/11 and they collected that along with others, that would be considered a secondary source. They would take those and maybe write what their thoughts are about what happened to me. And you could find that in biographies. So biographies are books written about other people, or textbooks. So our textbook for history that's online has a lot of is considered a secondary source. It will contain little bits and pieces of primary sources, but it has other writing in it that's considered a secondary source. So their biographies and textbooks are considered secondary sources. The other idea that we talk about before we begin learning about history and social studies is the idea of facts versus opinions. So facts can be proven. So an example of a fact is pretty simple. Is Miss Claypool, me, I am 5'8" tall. That's a fact. You could measure me right now and you'd see I'm 5'8" tall. An opinion is a personal belief. So example, Miss Claypool is awesome. Okay? That's a personal belief. It's not personally my belief, but I do have students who think I'm awesome. That is their opinion. Okay? And facts and opinion are often mixed together in primary and secondary sources. If I wrote about 9/11, I could talk about the time I saw things happening, the time it was when someone came in and told me that a plane had crashed in the Trade Center, the time that I saw the smoke coming out of the buildings. I could talk about that. But if I talk about how I felt, that's more of an opinion. And part of being a historian is figuring out what the facts are, even if opinions are present. okay? And you'll see there are examples in history where you'll see two different people's perspectives and they're opposite of what happened. So that is just part of being a historian, is kind of analyzing or really looking closely to see what is truth, what is fact, and what is just someone's opinion. So the last idea I want to talk about is that the reason we study history, why do we study what happened in the past? And the reason we study history is because it helps us understand things that are happening right now. There's always some unrest or some war or battles happening in the Middle East. And the reason those things are happen are because of events that happened way, way back in the past that have just contributed to all this unrest, meaning people being unhappy. Okay? And we can look at patterns of human behavior to see what might happen in the future. And that's one of the things that's most interesting to me as I've taught social studies the last few years, is there are all these patterns of behavior that you can track through the past by studying social studies and history. Okay, so that concludes the review for our quiz, and I hope you found it helpful.